Yes, students, so in the previous class, we had started with the topic on the derivation of the long run average cost curve. So when you talk about the long run average cost curve, automatically it relates to the long run production function. And I think so all of you understand that in the long run, if the producer is going to increase his level of output, he can do so by increasing all the factors of production, which means that all the factors of production are variable in nature. All the factors of production are variable in nature. So automatically all the costs which are incurred in the long run by the firm, they are called as the variable cost. So there is no concept of fixed cost in the long run. Yes, there is no concept of fixed cost in the long run. All the costs are variable in nature. So average cost, I think so all of you understand, average cost is nothing but the cost of the product per unit. We say cost per unit, which means whatever is the total cost divided by whatever is the amount produced by the firm will be called as the cost per unit. So I told you already before, students, that when we are talking about short run, the producer has certain fixed factors. On the fixed factor, the producer is employing the variable factor, produce a desired level of output. If he wants to expand his level of output, then what he can do is he can still put more of variable factor on the fixed factor. So that is why, if you remember, the AC curve is a U-shaped curve in the short run. It means that first the costs are going to decrease, which means that because more and more labor is being employed on the fixed factor of production, the fixed factor of production is used more efficiently. So when the returns are more, the cost is going to be less. When the returns are less, the cost is going to be high. So initially the returns are increasing at an increasing rate because the land or the fixed factor of production is used more properly. Then we have the point where there is an optimum proportion between the factors of production. So if you relate to the cost, that is the point where the cost of production is minimum. So the firm is producing whatever desired level of output where the cost of production is minimum. That is the production point for the producers. Yes, afterwards what happens in the short period of time, if the producer is employing more and more units of labor, his returns reduces, and if his return reduces, his cost is also going to increase, which means that the firm will have a U-shaped average cost curve. So when you're talking about the long run, students, keep one thing in mind. In reality, I told you before also, the production happens in the short period of time only. Long run is a gap. Long run is the plan where the producer or the firm wants to increase its level of output. Firms wants to increase its level of output. So we have explained this graph in the previous class, students, where we have drawn three SSC curve, SSC 1, 2 and 3. So when the firm is producing OQ, we see it here, students. One second. If you see it here for SSC 1, this is the minimum, this is the minimum cost. This is the minimum cost. So if they are producing this much level of output, the cost is the minimum. If they want to produce more on the same level of on the same machinery, on the same piece of land, the cost is going to increase. But when their output is getting increased, so automatically they cannot be using the same machinery, they cannot be using the same piece of land. So they have an option to expand, and when they have option to expand, it means that they can invest some money. They can invest some money for buying more of fixed factor of production. So when they are doing so, it is getting represented by another SSC curve, which we call it as SSC2. So if the firm is going to produce OQ1 level of output, he has two options. Either he produced in SSC1, it means he doesn't invest anything. He overwork the fixed factor of production. He overwork the fixed factor of production and he can produce. Or he has an option that he can invest some money in technology or whatever it may be, and produce the commodity at a lower cost. So students, when we are talking about the long run, they are nothing but it is a combination of short run period of time, and every whenever there is a decision made by the firm to increase its fixed factor of production, it gets theoretically it gets represented by another set of AC curve. So every AC curve, what we are going to draw it on the Lsc curve, represent some increase in the fixed factor of production. Some increase in the fixed factor of production. So all the SSC, it represents different type of, all the SSC represents the different types of or increase in the fixed factor of production. So students, I think so you have drawn this graph the other day.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now students, you are going to draw this graph. This graph is a final graph. This graph is a final graph wherein you will be drawing an LSC curve, which is a broader curve, and on the LSC curve you will be drawing different SSC curves. Because I told you that every SSC curve represents increase in the fixed factor of production. Increase in the fixed factor of production. And when you're drawing it, students, the SSC curve, make it sure that the SSC curve touches the LSC curve. So first you will draw the big LSC curve, and in between that curve, in between that hollow, you will be drawing the SSC curve. And keep one thing in mind, that when you draw the SSC curve, one SSC curve, which is SSC4 here, one SSC curve's minimum point should be the minimum point of the LSC curve also. If you see here, students, if you see the cursor here, this is SSC curve. It is touching the downward sloping part of the SSC curve. If you see it SSC curve, this is touching the upward sloping curve of SSC curve. But if you see the green one, students, if you see the green SSC curve, it is touching the point that this SSC curve is the minimum of SSC4 and minimum of LSC also. So please students, you will draw this graph. Have you drawn this graph? Did you draw this graph, students?
No, ma'am.
Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
Okay, please draw this graph, students, which is for the derivation of LSC curve. Students, once it is completed, let me know. Then I can proceed. If you're finished with your graph.
Yeah, ma'am. Finish.
Finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Rest of you students?
Ma'am, just a sec.
Okay. I'll wait for 2 more minutes.
Ma'am, roll number 41 present, ma'am.
Who's roll number 41?
Bharat, ma'am.
Okay, Bharat. I think so you must given your attendance already. Who?
Okay, ma'am.
28.
Who is 28?
Jeetika, ma'am.
Ritika. Okay.
Ma'am, roll number 40.
Oh my God. How many of you joined so late? Who is 40?
Gayatri, ma'am.
20. Who's writing the in the chat box? Okay. So student, this is the final graph for the long run average cost curve. So if you are getting the derivation of long run average cost curve in your examination, you have to draw both the graphs. First graph is mainly related to the explanation, and the second graph is the actual graph of LAC, which again is a U-shaped curve, but it is a flat. It is much flatter as compared to a short run average cost curve. Short run average cost curve is a U-shaped curve. LSE also is a U-shaped curve, but it is flatter as compared to the SSE. So if you see it here also, as the firm is increasing its level of output, see the cursor students, as the firm is increasing its level of output, their cost is going to decrease. It means as the producers or as the firm is going to increase its level of output, as the firm is going to increase its production process by employing more and more of inputs, that is, they are increasing their scale of production. First, the cost is going to decrease. Then at a level of output, it is going to be minimum. And after that minimum level of output, after that minimum level of cost, the cost is going to increase. The cost is going to increase. Now students, if you remember when we did SSE curve, I'm always talking about the law of variable proportion. When we are doing long run average cost curve, it relates to the law of returns to scale. It relates to the law of returns to scale. And if you remember, in returns to scale law, we had 3 different laws, which means increasing returns to scale, decreasing returns to scale, and constant returns to scale. Which means that if the firm is increasing its inputs by 10%, output may increase by more than 10%, or output may increase equal to 10%, or output may increase less than 10%. So accordingly, the firm will have increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale. So the same concept, students, we are going to utilize it here to explain as to why the cost is going to decrease when the output is going to increase, and why the cost is going to become minimum for a certain level of output, and why then the cost is going to decrease. So this we will be explaining with the this is because again it is because of the increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale. I tell you again and again the same thing so that it gets drilled into your head. Returns and cost are opposite to each other. Returns and cost are opposite to each other. So when the returns are more, the cost is less. So initially when the level of output is increased by the producer by putting more of all the factors of production, what happens? The returns are going to be more. And the returns are going to be more because of the economies of scale, which is the advantages of large scale production. And the cost is going to be minimum where the economies and diseconomies of scale are equal to each other, which means that the advantages and disadvantages of large scale production, they will cancel out each other so that the cost of production is going to be minimum. How the cost is going to increase? Beyond certain level of output, if we are increasing the output in the long run, what happens is there will be diseconomies of scale because the scale has become much more. It has become expanded so that the firm may experience certain disadvantages. So because of that, the returns to scale will be less and the average cost curve is going to increase. So this is what you have to write, students, when you talk about the LSE curve. And if you read these lines, what I have just highlighted, LSE curve is also called as an envelope curve because it is enveloping the short-run average cost curve. It's also called as a planning curve because it helps the firm to plan the level of output which will be at the minimum cost. I hope so you have understood it. The LSE curve, because LSE curve, if you are getting a question on LSE curve, it's a separate question. The question is why you can write, you can be asked is that why why the LSE curve is called as an envelope curve, why LSE curve is called as a planning curve, or how do we derive LSE curve from the SSE curves. All different questions, but we'll give you the same answer. Same answer, you have to write everything on LSE. Is it okay, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Others?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, few more should respond so that I know.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Rest of them, only the ones who will respond. Others, though, I don't know what you are doing behind the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I can hear many of you. Okay. Now we continue, and as we have done the marginal cost, short-run marginal cost, we are also doing the long-run marginal cost. And again, I want to just give you a recap. When you say marginal cost is the cost, it is the additional cost incurred by the firm because of the production of additional unit of an output. Marginal, again and again I tell you, student, it is just an increase in one unit. Here you are talking about cost is related to production. So if there is an increase in the level of output by 1 unit, what is going to be the increase in the cost? That is what we call it as marginal cost. So students, when you are drawing the marginal cost curve, This is the same way as we have drawn the long run average cost curve. Long run marginal cost curve also is derived from the short run average cost curve, because every short run average cost curve will have the short run marginal cost curve also, because if you remember, we have done the relationship between SSC and SMC. SSC and SMC, the relation is that if when the average cost is decreasing, the marginal cost also is decreasing and lying below it. SMC cuts SSC at its minimum point, and when the SSC increases, SMC also increases and it lies above it. So students, if you look into this graph, we have drawn the Lsc curve, which is in blue. And on that blue, we have drawn only 3 SSC curves so that it is easier for you to understand. 3 SSC curve we have drawn because Lsc curve is the planning curve which is enveloping so many SSCs. But for making it more simpler, we have drawn only 3 SSC curve. And on the SSC curve, we have drawn the SMC curves also. And SMC curves are drawn in such a way that it is touching the minimum point of SSC curve. So if you look into this green, students, green curves, these are all SMC curve. SMC1, SMC2, SMC3. And then we have drawn a dotted red line, which we have written is long run marginal cost, LRMC. And if you see the dotted line, you will see that this dotted red line is touching all the SMC curves. It is touching the SMC1 here at below. Then it is touching the SMC at this point, that is the minimum point, and then it is touching the SMC third one, which is at the upper part of the SMC curve. So as the short run average cost curve touches the LAC curve, similarly, when we are deriving the marginal cost curve, long run marginal cost curve, that curve should touch some or the other point of the short run marginal cost curve. And then we join some points of the SMC curve to derive the long run marginal cost curve. So this is what we talk about, that as we have series of SSC curve in the long run, because every SSC curve represent increase in the fixed cost. So because we have SSC curve, our marginal cost will also change. So when the marginal cost changes, every SSC curve will have a corresponding SMC curve also, because of the change in the cost. So your LMC curve or LRMC curve is nothing but it is derived from the SMC curve. So please students, look into this graph and draw the graph of the LMC curve. This curve, most of the time I've never seen this being asked in examination, but then we need to do it because it is in your syllabus. We have drawn the short run marginal cost curve, we have to do the long run marginal cost curve. But I have never seen this being asked in the examination. For long run, it is mainly the average cost. So please draw the graph, students. Yes, students, if it is over, please let me know.
Done, ma'am.
Done. Now, students, the relationship between LSE and LMC, it is just the same as what we have done it before.
Ma'am, 1 minute, ma'am. Completed, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, students. So I was telling you that when we talk about the relationship between LSE and LMC, it is the same as what we have done it with SMC and LMC. So very quickly, you please draw, just give the heading and write down relationship between LSE and LMC. Just give the heading in your notebook, students, relationship between LSE and LMC, and you will draw the same graph, but the difference is it is much more flatter. So LMC also cuts the LSE at its minimum point. So this, you have drawn the same graph for short run average cost curve and short run marginal cost curve. Now you'll draw the for LSE and LMC. Very quickly, please draw this graph. Sorry, students. Students finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So this is what is, but students, in your examination, usually if you are getting that, just write it down. The relationship between marginal cost and average cost, both the relationship is just the same graph. So if they're mentioning short run, you will draw U-shaped, more U-shaped. If you are they're giving long run, then you will draw flatter. That is the only difference. Yes, so we will be, the last one is why this LSE curve is a U-shaped curve. As I just told you, this is mainly because of the law of returns to scale. Law of returns to scale. In the beginning, when you talk about as the firm is increasing its level of output, or if the firm is increasing its level of output by increasing all the factors of production, which means that their scale of production is increased. So when it happens, so then the firm is going to experience economies of scale. Economies of scale are nothing but it is the advantages of long run production, advantages of large scale production. Advantages of large scale production. So due to the advantages of large scale production, the returns are going to be higher, which means that the cost is going to decrease. So they are increasing the input by 10%, but when their output is increased by more than 10%, it means the returns are higher, which leads to the decrease in the cost of production. Similarly, when you talk about the constant returns to scale, that is where we talk about where we have the minimum point, of the average cost curve. At that point, the economies and diseconomies of scale, they are going to be equal to each other. So it means that there are certain advantages of large scale production, there are certain disadvantages of large scale production, but when the cost is minimum, at that point, both are going to be equal to each other. Both are going to be equal to each other. And when after that point, if the firm is still increasing its level of output by increasing its factor inputs, all factor inputs, what happens is the firm will start experiencing decreasing returns to scale. And I think so all of you understand decreasing returns to scale means that the cost is going to be higher. So we have done a little bit of it. What are the economies of scale? What are the diseconomies of scale when we did the law of returns to scale? But eventually we have a total chapter on the economies and diseconomies of scale, which means that what are the advantages the firm will experience when the firm is expanding its level of output? What are the disadvantages the firm is going to experience when they expand their output, when they expand the output too much? So this is what is the reasons as to why we have the U-shaped of the LSE curve. In the beginning, the economies of large scale production is more. Later, the diseconomies of large scale production is more. That is why the cost is increasing. Here the cost is decreasing, and at this point, at the middle point, the economies and diseconomies, they balance each other. That is the point, that's the level of output which the firm cost is minimum because of the balancing of the economies and diseconomies of scale. Yes, so students, this finishes with your topic on the LSE curve, that is your cost curves. So tomorrow when we come back for the class, I will be starting the beginning of the concepts, that is your theoretical part. What are the different cost concepts? I did not do it in the beginning because I wanted to do this cost function because it involved the graphs and the table. So I started directly with the cost function. So we are left with the different cost concepts which are used. So we will be taking that small theoretical parts tomorrow, and if the time permits, we will continue with the next chapter, which will be on the economies and diseconomies of scale. So tomorrow we will have an offline class. On Friday, it will be most probably a holiday because of Guru Nanak Jayanti. And then eventually we are going to meet on Saturday, wherein we continue if we are economies and diseconomies of scale, and then we can start with the revenue analysis also. So depending upon how the situation is, students, I will take 1 hour on Saturday. If other teachers are giving me the class, or if I can adjust, I may take a second hour on Saturday. But 1 hour is for sure, which is my scheduled class. 1 hour is for sure. Second hour, it all depends how the situation is. I will be taking the second hour, otherwise I'll take 1 hour, and we can start with the revenue analysis. I want to start with the revenue analysis because again, that involves certain graphs, that involves certain table as what we have done for cost. So on Saturday, we will surely take the revenue analysis. And I hope so all of you are preparing for your exams, though the question bank has been given to you. Prepare for the question from the question bank, and I hope so, because you're going to write for the first time. Prepare well, students, because you don't have to do extensively. Whatever is given in the question bank, if you do it thoroughly, that will be more than enough for you to write this examination. Yes, so we'll meet tomorrow, students, and start with this one, the cost concepts. What are the various cost concepts which are used in economics? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am,
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, please tell me who is this?
ma'am, tomorrow college is there.
Tomorrow college, tomorrow, or there's nothing. If there is a holiday, it is going to be on